All right. Good afternoon, it seems. Good afternoon if you're on this side of the pond. Good morning if you're on the other side of the pond. Whether you are in Guyana, somewhere in the Caribbean, in South America, in the States, wherever you are, good morning to you. If you're on this side, good afternoon. Hope you had a wonderful day, and hope that you're in good health. Today, I'm going to talk about the state of the dead. What happens to people when they die? And of course, I'm going to speak about it. It's a lecture. You're going to find out. I'm not going to speak. I'm not going to give a speech. It's like any other lecture on my channel. Uh, and obviously, from a lecture, one listens, one takes something away, one understands things as they are, hopefully. So I'm not going to be speaking from a theological point of view. I'm going to be speaking from a strictly biblical point of view, what the Bible reveals and what you should be learning and taking away from the Bible. Let me just get my tools open, my whiteboard. One sec. So yeah, we're going to talk about what happens to dead people. Like every culture and every people group, every nation on earth, um, every nation on earth has got its own version of what happens when people die, and everyone derives culture, superstition, beliefs, values, depending on what their culture is and what their worldview is. So again, what happens to dead people depends on which culture you come from. This is very important to remember. Which culture, tradition, and general beliefs, right? So, and these beliefs, they can be two types of beliefs. They can be religious or they can be superstitious, right? What am I doing here? I need my eraser. So they can be religious beliefs or just plain superstitious beliefs. I think every culture has a little bit of both, something religious and something superstitious. And when I say religious, obviously in the last 500 years, since the Middle Ages till now, the world has been in its colonized form. What I mean by colonized form, one overarching belief that has been forced upon many cultures, many nations, many traditions. So what we have as a world today is a conglomeration of many things that hope to erase the traditional beliefs of the people. Whatever your tradition was, whether you're Scottish, whether you're Welsh, whether you're Dutch, whether you're African, whether you are Asian, whether you are, you know, Siberian, whatever. There's an overarching belief that forms part of this world, right? And so all these things have given us individually in our individual cultures, this gives us it gives us a worldview. All these things help us to form a worldview so that we can deal with things that we see and hear and have to live through. Uh, each individual culture has this, and of course, I spoke about one overarching culture, which is what we call today, we call it the world, right? But in its colonized form, we know it's the Western world. So the Western world is that overarching belief that seeks to shape and form worldview, the worldview of people, and that touches culture, tradition, and beliefs, religious beliefs, And of course, the religion of the Western world is Christianity. Of course, there are other religions in the world that are prominent. There's obviously Judaism, the three most prominent religions, and Christianity, and obviously Islam. And each one of them has an individual worldview. But it's very interesting that Judaism's worldview is the biblical worldview. And the rest are derived or they're derivatives of this Jewish worldview, both Christianity and Islam. Because the Quran could not have been written without the Bible, the Christian Bible could not have been written without the Jewish Bible, without the Hebrew scriptures. And of course, the Jewish Bible is, in academic circles, we call it the Masoretic text. The Masoretic text. In Judaism, we just call it the Masorah. All right, I'm not going to be comparing religions here, obviously. The whole idea is for us to understand what happens to people when they die, right? So what happens when we croak? What happens when we kick the bucket? What happens when the pitcher breaks? And all these other euphemisms that we use to understand death. But before we can understand death, we must understand what life is, okay? So you can never, ever understand what death is if you don't understand first what life is. And for us to understand life, we must go to Genesis, Genesis chapter 2, specifically verse 7. So if you have a Bible, I want you to pause the video and go to your Bible to Genesis 2, verses 7. I'm probably sure that you are going to have a Christian Bible in your hand because that's the most proliferated version in the world. It's called the Holy Bible. The Holy Bible does not come from Judaism. It's a production of the Christian Church or the Church of Rome specifically. It was published uh, in the 800s. It was first published in the 800s or the 9th century. By the time you get to the King James Version, the New International Version, etc., etc., uh, it's already been several centuries that this Holy Bible has existed. Uh, the Holy Bible from the church begins in Genesis and ends in a book called Revelation. The original Bible that comes from Jewish tradition, the Masorah, it ends with Second Chronicles. It starts in Genesis and ends in Second Chronicles. I'm not going to go too deep uh, as to how this goes or why this is so. There's a video on my channel that says that is entitled "What is the Bible?" You should go there to find out what exactly is the Bible. But basically, what I'm trying to tell you here is that this Genesis to Revelation, this canon belongs to the church. And the Genesis to Revelation, sorry, the Genesis to Second Chronicles is the original Bible that comes from us, from the Word of God, preserved by the Hebrews or the Jewish people. The New Testament is not part of the Jewish scriptures, and I explain in that video why it isn't part of the Jewish scriptures. So let's go to Genesis. I just wanted you to have that bit of information that as you read Genesis 2, verse 7, you can expect to see something that is a tiny bit different to what it says or what it might say in Hebrew. So In Hebrew, um, it says, and the Lord God formed man out of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Vayitzer Adonai Elohim et ha'adama apar mi ha'adama vayipach be'apayim nishmat nishmat chaim yeah nishmat chaim vayehi ha'adam lenefesh chaya, which means that God literally formed man out of the dust of the ground. He breathed into his nostrils a breath of life, and man became a living soul. So that's what we can take away. I'm going to write this down, God. So God forms in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, man is formed out of the dust of the ground. The dust is literally loam soil. Okay, so God made the human being out of the loam soil. Loam soil is red in color, usually. If you go to the central part of South Africa, you go to the rural parts of South Africa, you'll find red earth, which produces the great food that we eat in South Africa. So if you ask yourself, what color was the original human being? What color was Adam? So if you want to know what skin color Adam had, this is also random. You didn't ask for this. So if you wanted to know what color Adam was, or the original human being, just for interest sake, and since we live in an overly politicized world, let's see, what options do I have here? Not many, I suppose. All right, so let's look at the word Adam. Adam means, this is Hebrew, this is English. Adam means human being. It doesn't mean uh, anything too different from what we're talking about. So Adam means human being. There's two words that make Adam, as you can see in English. It is ad. I really don't like this feature on Zoom. I wish it was better. Anyways, so we have here ad plus um. Actually, I'm doing this wrong. It should be D. Ad plus dam. So ad means earth. Oops, earth. Those of you who speak German, Dutch, and Afrikaans, you are familiar with this word, aard, the art. So this word, the art, comes from the Hebrew, from the original Aramaic. Aramaic and Hebrew have influenced all the languages of the world. All the languages of the world are influenced by Hebrew and Aramaic. Aramaic is the original language of man, of human beings. Aramaic. This is the language that God spoke to Adam and Eve, Aramaic. And Aramaic was spoken in the original home of the human being, which is the Garden of Eden, which stretches all the way to Iraq. What am I doing? So I'm going to reconcile what I'm saying with what I'm writing just now. I wish I was a woman, then I could multitask. Obviously, I can't. So Eden, which is in the land of Israel, it starts from the land of Israel, from where the Mediterranean is, and stretches all the way to the Euphrates River, where Iraq is. All of that was the Garden of Eden, right? So Aramaic. How did Aramaic become Hebrew? There is a video on this same channel, which is entitled Salvation. There I explain that because Abraham left Iraq and went to the land of Canaan and crossed the Jordan River, his speech changed from Aramaic, a common language, to a holy language called Ivrit, which is Hebrew, and that's the language of the scriptures, the language that God used to create the earth. So back to our little illustration here. So Adam or Adam in its proper pronunciation, Adam, Ad is the earth and Dam is blood. So when you mix the earth with blood, you get red soil. You get red earth or red soil. And this red soil is the color of Adam. This was the color of the first human being. The Bible does not speak of race. Race, it does not speak of race when it speaks to humans. In the Bible, race is one species, and that is human. There's one human race. When science and the world speak about race, they are thinking about divisions between, because you must understand that the theory of evolution, what it tries to do is to find commonalities and relations between animals and people, not only in the form of the tissues and the genetic materials, well, not genetic materials, but the genetic materials that produces different types of flesh. So you can have race in animals, right? You can have a race in animals. You can have race in different creatures. For example, the human race is not the same as the angelic race. Angels and humans are not the same. And obviously, humans and demons are not the same, and dinosaurs are not the same, right? But when we speak of human beings, the human being, the definition of the human being is Adam, that is one race. Okay. So if you've ever wondered um what the color of Adam, now you know we're all like Earth. So whether you come from China, South Africa, Sudan, you're as black as night. You come from Belgium, you are as white as the clouds. You come from Austria, wherever. Every human being is a shade of red. We sometimes say brown, right? Every human being is a shade of brown. It's either you're on the light spectrum of brown or a medial spectrum, or you're on the extreme side uh, of being dark, like the beautiful Sudanese people who are Kushite. So this is what Genesis 2 verses 7 tells us, but let's go into the details of this verse. Let me erase everything else. I give you all this information just to give you a picture of the biblical landscape. Some of these things you didn't really need to know, but it's part of the biblical landscape. So when you studying the Bible, you're not having a Bible study, you are extrapolating meaning from the Bible using the Hebrew language. If you ever study the Bible in jou in Afrikaans, of Engels, or in French, or in German, or in Xhosa and Zulu, you are missing out. Because once you translate the Bible from Hebrew to any language in the world, you lose 80% of its meaning. 80% of its meaning you lose. So Genesis 2 verse 7 tells us that we were made of ard or ad, and we are made with dam. And then what did God do to this combination of blood and the earth? God formed it into the human being. So from this, God makes the body, the human body, right? Of course, I am Monsieur Artiste par excellence. My artwork is impeccable. So God makes the body, and the body, according to the Bible, in the language of the Bible, is called a guf in Hebrew. Guf, it just means a big clod of earth, a body, just meat, guf. And then what does God do to this guf, the Bible tells us? It says, God breathed into the man's nostrils. So God breathes into man's nostrils. He has some eyes. God breathes into this lifeless form. But what does God breathe into this lifeless form? A breath of life. Ah, what is a breath of life? So we go to the original language of the Bible, which is ruach. Ruach can be carelessly translated into English as spirit. Spirit in English means two things. It means breath. It means breath, number one. Number two, spirit means animation, right? So animation is what we call in South African language, we call it gees, right? So when you go to the rugby stadium and you feel a little bit of gees and you cheer for the Boks, what do you get? You get gees. You feel the animation, you feel the gees, and you shout your breath out into the game. So the human being breathes life into a rugby match. Now I can't spell rugby. And God breathed ruach spirit into the human being. And what did the human being become after God had breathed? It says, it breathed into his nostrils a breath of life, and man became a living soul. So God took dust, he makes the body, he breathes into it, the body becomes a living soul. Right? It becomes a living soul. What is this living soul by definition? By definition, this living soul is a combination of body plus spirit or chias, right? That's what the soul is. If you need to pause this video, please pause the video and think about what I've just said before continuing. I'm going to erase this now, assuming that you paused the video and you thought about what I just said and you understand it. If not, you can write to me later. I can explain it to you in depth. However, this is a basic teaching of the Bible that I'm giving to you for free. If you want an in-depth understanding of the Bible, that will be tuition. It equals tuition, and therefore it means that you would have to make a little bit of an investment in order to get the complete meaning of the Bible in detail. So let me just get rid of this. So we understand that the ruach or the spirit comes from God. God breathes the ruach into himself. So the Bible tells us that God is spirit. Isaiah tells us that God is a consuming fire. So God tells us, I mean, what's his name? Isaiah tells us that God is a consuming fire. So the ruach literally is a combination of these things. God is Ruach, God is spirit. God is both spirit and a consuming fire. What does that mean? It means that this is God, for example. Let's make this nice little block. Again, I'm showing my expertise as Monsieur Artiste par excellence. I am making fun of myself. So let's pretend that this is God. God is known to create many things that have living souls, animals, humans, etc., etc. And every time that God creates something, he gives it a little bit of himself. God creates a human being named George, and God gives George a tiny bit of himself. And then God breaks another piece here. He gives, why do I keep, anyways, uh, and God gives a little piece to a woman named Tanya. And then God breaks another piece, he gives it to Sipo. God breaks another piece, he gives it to another person. God breaks another piece, etc., etc. And 9 billion human beings later, God has given a little bit of himself because God is the original soul. God has given himself to billions of humanity, billions of animals, billions of, or trillions even of other creatures that we don't even know exist. And what happens is, here's George. George lives to be 95 years old. And one day George dies. And this little piece of George goes back to God. There it is. And then Michael or Sipo dies. And then it goes back to God. Rachel dies, it goes back to God, etc., etc. So whenever the human being dies, the soul goes back to God, and God takes this soul again, he sends it back to earth. This time he's born as Sipo, for example. I want you to notice something curious. This guy was George. So George is English. Maybe George was an Englishman that was living in South London or whatever. He's died, and his body, which is the goof, oh, what am I doing? Which is the goof, his human body is buried in a grave somewhere in South London because he kicked the bucket. So the body's here. Here's George. Rest in peace, George. But the moment that George dies, his soul traveled all the way back to God, and here's George. And then George decided to send George back to Earth, not as George, but as Sipo. Sipo is a Zulu. Oops. Sipo is a Zulu man, right? A Zulu child in this case. In our little human minds, in our little fickle, small human minds, how can an Englishman, a white person, die and then is brought back to Earth as Sipo, a brown Zulu man or a black Zulu man? How is it possible? It's because God doesn't really care about skin color, because God is a soul. A soul has no color. A soul has no color. It is basically, if you want to be scientific, a soul is an energy, if you want to be scientific. It has no color. It's just a fire. It's just a spirit. It's a breath of life, a soul. The goof, it looks like the earth. It's a spectrum of brown. So actually, it's a spectrum of red. All of us, whether you are as white as somebody from Norway or whether you are as black as somebody from Sudan, you are a shade of red, or brown or maroon. You are the shade of the earth. So God is not concerned with the shade of you. God is giving you life. He's giving you his soul. So here it is. George died. His body's in the grave somewhere in South London, but his soul went back to God. And God's like, since I'm a giving God and a loving God, I'm going to create another human being. So Sipho's parents uh, decide to have a child. And they're like, hey, little Sipho is born. But what they don't know is Sipho was George's soul. In his past life, he was a white man. Now he's a Zulu man. And they wonder why Sipho is so different. Sipho likes, he doesn't like pop and flakes. He likes bubble and squeak. He likes mashed potatoes and sausages. He likes things that are completely different. And Sipho's parents are like, ha, Inan Lenga, I know why is he different from us? It's because God is not concerned with Sipho's looks and appearance. He's concerned with Sipho's soul. So this recycling of the soul is called Kilkul, but I'm not going to teach you Kabbalah, and all those other high level types of explanations. If you want to get to those explanations, it's a different arrangement. It's not a free video anymore. It's a lesson. It's a planned way of learning for you, for the growth of your spirituality and also for you to understand God. So this process is called kilkul, this whole recycling process, which is why you should never be racist towards anybody. Even if that person is being racist to you, never be racist back to anybody. If you see, for example, if you go to Cape Town, you meet a guy named Mandla, right? A guy named Mandla in Cape Town, and Mandla speaks English uh, with a touch of Welsh, maybe, or with a touch of London, maybe, or with a received pronunciation. And you judge Mandla and you say, dude, you're black. Why do you speak like a white man? You are being racist to the appearance of Mandla, but in actual fact, you are being racist to Mandla's essence, which is his soul. In other words, you are insulting the image of God. So don't be racist to anybody in any way, whether it's racism, conventional racism, whether it's reverse racism, whether you are trying to shame somebody to conform to a mold, to conform to your social norms. You are damaging God. You're not damaging that person, even though you're abusing them. Essentially, you are damaging God, right? So this is how it works. So let's understand a little bit of the soul in depth. You can pause this video and review some of the things that I've said. Think about it for a little bit. Write down a question. You can email me later if you have a question. If you want to study in depth, we can make arrangements for you to study over a period of time so that you understand the whole Bible and you understand God's world correctly. Uh, I think my email details are actually on my channel. Oops, I don't mean to erase that one. So let's focus on the soul, on the essence of the soul. In Genesis, we get several levels of the soul, and I'm gonna have to share my screen for you to see them. Where is my paintbrush application? Where is it? Okay, let's do away with this first. I never use this paintbrush. How do I close it? Let's see. Ah, there it is. Nope. I usually use Word document for these things. I never for illustrations. I'm not sure how this is supposed to work. Oh, there it is. It's quite easy. Because one uses so many applications, I decided to simplify my teaching tools to just using Word and drawing from Microsoft Word and illustrating on Microsoft Word. It's so much easier. But why is it not showing me what I want it to show me? So let's see. 1 second while there we go. There we go. It's much better. So anyways, I prepared this little thing in advance for you to illustrate the nature of the soul. When we talk about a human soul, we are not talking about a ghost, okay? A ghost is a word that comes from a very superstitious part of society. But specifically, the word ghost comes to us rather from the English language, but every language on earth has a version or of this word ghost. So it's the soul is not a ghost, it's a living energy. It's a part of God. And that's why you should love your neighbor as yourself, even though it's inconvenient, because if you hate someone, you are hating God. It's that simple. So the soul, not the ghost, the soul has 3 levels. Sorry, has 5 levels. 3 of these levels we get from the Bible, from Genesis 2, verses 7, that God made out of the ground nephesh, which is the flesh and the body, and then God breathed the ruach into the nostrils of the man, and the man became a living soul, a neshama, a living soul. So the first level of the human soul is a nephesh. What is a nephesh? The nephesh is the physical flesh, okay? The body, the sinews, the everything that forms the anatomy. The anatomy means the flesh and the body, and of course the physiology, which is animation of the body. The animation of the body is physiology. Okay, so anatomy and physiology are the nephesh, are the first level of the human soul. And then God breathed ruach. What is ruach? Ruach is a spirit or breath of life, right? Um, my phone's ringing. Give me 1 sec. Hi, I'm in a lecture. Sorry. Okay, bye. So the second part is ruach, which is a spirit. The spirit is breath. Okay. God created oxygen. Okay. Oxygen, God created from ruach, spirit. From spirit, God created oxygen. So the breath of life, ruach, is oxygen plus fire, which is the spark of life. In if you study if you are a curious person and you study medical textbooks, or you're in medical school, or maybe it's just general knowledge, you will understand that when the doctor does an ECG on a patient and they put those little button thingies all over their chest to see how their heart is beating and how their pulse is going, it's electricity that connects the mind and the heart. So the mind and the heart are connected with fire or electricity. So the human body does have electricity, and this is the breath of life, which is the fire plus this oxygen over here. and then we are able to breathe. So if you're in hospital, on a hospital bed and you are dying, it's because the fire that you have, this candle that's burning inside of you, or this electricity that's inside of you, it's burning out. And when it burns out, you die. When the candle burns out, oxygen leaves your body as well. And therefore, the ruach leaves your body and goes back to God. George is dead, but someday God will send him back to earth, maybe, not always, as Sipo or Mandla, whatever the case might be, or whatever God decides. And then the third level of the soul is called the neshama. The neshama, because I want you to understand one thing, we are rising in levels. From level one, we are in level three. So the most carnal and most base level of the soul is the flesh. So when you are hungry, it's the nephesh. This level of the soul wants food. When you want sexual intercourse, is because the flesh, this lowest level of the flesh, wants attention. When you want to go and praise God or do something spiritual, you want to go hiking, you want to worship, you want to do something spiritual, it's because the Ruach wants attention inside of you, your spirit and your emotions. And also now the higher level above the Ruach is the Neshama, which is the intellect. When you go to school to study, when you study the Bible, when you listen to my lecture, is because your Neshama, your soul, is in need of intellectual stimulation so that your cognitive function can give you the answers that you need to your questions. So the neshama deals with this, the brain. Level 4 and level 5 of which is Chaya, level 4 is Chaya, which is the living soul. Neshamot Chaim, which is the living soul. When the Bible says Neshamot Chaim, it doesn't mean the living soul in in the biblical language, which is Hebrew. Living soul is an English translation. In Hebrew, the Bible adds an S. It says living, actually, Neshamot. Yeah, it says livings souls, which is just plural for living souls. Okay. So Chaya is a fourth level. It's high up, which is your willpower. When you go to the garage to buy a piece of bread, are you going to steal a chocolate? Are you going to steal a Coke? That's willpower. It's higher up in your beyond your intellect. It's higher up. It's your willpower. Am I going to do it? Am I not going to do it? If you don't want to go to work, are you going to work? Are you not going to work? Are you going to stay in bed? This decision is made higher up in your willpower, in your chaya. And that means your inclination. What are you going to do? Inclination and decision making. So currently in South Africa, we have a challenge with the government because in all government structures, we have corrupt people. There's corruption. And those corrupt people are ruled by their willpower to steal from the fiscus or not to steal from the fiscus, to rob the South African people or not to rob the South African people. And this is based on the nefesh, their basic desire to satisfy themselves, which affects their spirituality in a negative way. And then their intellect makes the wrong decisions and their willpower reinforces the wrong decisions. The same is the same engineering is true when you want to do good things. Okay? And then there's Yechida. Yechida is very interesting. That is the spark of life. Yechida is in the bones. Yechida is the true electricity in your body. Growing up, there was a song on the radio, a love song. For the life of me, I can't remember who wrote the song. It goes, I feel it in my fingers. I feel it in my toes. So that love song, it tells the person in love that I can feel this love in my fingers, in my toes. I think when I left high school, a few years after high school, some clever guy also wrote a song and it says, the lyric goes, it starts in my toes and then tingle in my nose or something like that. It's because when somebody's in love, they feel yechida, they feel that tingle in their bones. That tingle is electricity. This speaks true for for love, hatred, shock, etc., etc. So yechida is that electricity in your bones, which is your essence, your true essence, who you really are, is in the yechida. Whether you're a bubbly personality or whether you are a killjoy, that is in your yechida. Okay? And when you die, the yechida is the last one to leave your bones. The yechida is the last one to leave your bones. So while we are here, let's open a new I don't want to save this one. Let's open a new page, a clean page, and let's talk about what happens when we die. So now we're talking about death. Again, I'm pretending to be Monsieur Monet, Monsieur Artiste par excellence, right? You can tell I did well at art at school. So what happens when this guy dies, right? So he dies, he's gone. How many days are there in the week? There's obviously 7 days in the week. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's make an example that Monsieur over here, let's call him, what should we call this guy? Uh, let's call him Mr. Mouse. So if Mr. Mouse, that's hilarious, Mr. Mouse, he dies and it's a Sunday, for example, his soul is going to linger. So Mr. Mouse's neshama, because this is the general word for soul in the Bible and therefore in Hebrew, he's dead, so his spirit goes, wee. And here's God in heaven. God is ready to receive Mr. Mouse, but God will not receive Mr. Mouse right away. So Mr. Mouse, the different levels of the soul, which are neshama, ruach, chaya, etc., etc., all those levels of the souls that I showed you, they take 7 days to go to God, to go back to God. So Mr. Mouse is going to linger. He's going to linger around for 7 days, lingering. From the day that he died to the day where he ascends to heaven, his soul ascends to heaven, he's going to linger around. This is why Jews and Muslims bury someone within 24 hours or 72 hours latest. Jews and Muslims do that. People are not kept for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 5 weeks in order to avoid witchcraft. In order to avoid witchcraft and spiritism and all these other weird things, Muslims and Jews. Somebody dies within 24 hours or 72 hours, they are buried. What happens when Mr. Mouse dies? His soul, his neshama, for the first time in his life, let's say this is him lying down over here, right? It's him lying down with his hands folded. This is very morbid, by the way, but it's life. So he's pretty much dead as dead gets on his bed over here. I should have become an artist. I'm a natural. So he's dead. The spark of life. Here's the spark of life, which is his soul. It leaves his body. Whee! And it lingers around for 7 days. This soul is ashamed of being outside the body. The soul has never been outside the body. Because when Mr. Mouse was conceived by his parents, God sent down the soul And when Mr. and Mrs. Mouse's father and mother conceived him, when when the zygote formed in the womb, the cell, which is the flesh, it was united with the soul, and he became a fetus. And that fetus was born and he became human. So when he dies, for the first time, the soul is separated from the flesh, and it wonders, what the hell happened to me? Why am I outside the body? Why have I left my body? This is called an outer body experience. This is called the outer body experience. If you have an outer body experience, you literally die and come back, right? That's called. Oops, I put the E in the wrong place or the dot in the wrong place. But anyways, that's what's called an outer body experience. Only this time when you die, this outer body experience is permanent. You're not coming back to your body just yet. When are you going to come back to your body? At the time called the resurrection. The time called the resurrection, that's when God destroys this world and we transition from this world to another world. The church wrongfully called this world heaven because heaven is based on an idea of paradise which comes to us from paganism. You must remember, Christianity is a mixture of paganism and Nazarene Judaism. So it is pure paganism, which came to us through the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century. Please don't be offended. I'm just telling you the truth. I'm sorry if you're offended. You can challenge me later. But the resurrection is when God destroys this world and makes it anew on the day that God returns for the second time to his temple in Jerusalem. Everybody who died with their name written in the book of life, not the book of remembrance, they will resurrect and they will see God. They will transition to the next world, which is called Olam Haba. But for our friend over here, Mr. Mouse, he's dead. His spark of life or his neshama, it's now ascending. It lingers for 7 days, eventually ascending to God after 7 days. So on the 8th day, there's no more Mr. Mouse. Mr. Mouse is gone completely from this earth. His soul returns to God. If you need to, please pause this video. Please pause the video if you need to and review what I've said, because now I'm going to talk about purgatory, hell, and heaven. Okay? I'm going to talk about hell and heaven. Just have a look at this, pause the video, have a look at this, and then when you're ready, you can start the video again. So I'm going to do away with this whole slide. I'm going to open a new one. I wanted to talk about two things now. Oh, where's my pen? I was using this pen here, a pencil rather. So we have heaven and we have hell. And then we have this doctrine that came from a German Christian priest called purgatory. According to Tetzel, was it Tetzel? I think it was Tetzel. He was extorting the German population, the poor followers of the church, extorting money from them. He said that obviously there's a devil with a pitchfork, right? So here's a devil with funny horns. He has a pitchfork in his hands. And all your loved ones, including Mr. Mouse, here's Mr. Mouse, is gone to hell. Tetzel said he's burning in hell. You have to give money, give your Wall and Krugerrands to the church so that Mr. Mouse here can be hunkadory in hell. There'll be no fire for Mr. Mouse. And a lot of people paid money to the religious institution and to Tetzel because they thought their loved ones would die, who are dead, they were burning and suffering. To relieve their suffering, they must give money. This was all rubbish. It was extortion. It was a way of making people to part with their monies. So this doctrine of purgatory, what does it come from? Let's look at the biblical definition of heaven. The biblical definition of heaven is sky. In the sky, there are 7 levels. These 7 levels, you know them as 7 heavens. And above the seventh is God's throne. So above this is God's throne. That's where God sits. In each of these levels, there's an angel who is a warrior who's guarding the entrances to these 7 levels. I cannot go deep into it right now because I don't want to confuse you, but if you're interested in these subjects, as I said earlier, we can organize something and you can learn formally. So, so heaven means sky. Heaven is just English. English is heaven. The Bible says sky, which is shamayim in Hebrew. Hell is also English. Doesn't exist really in the Bible. Uh, Hell is Gehinnom. The Bible calls it Gehinnom. What the hell is Gehinnom? So here's our beautiful planet Earth. In geography, they taught us that there are many onion levels to the Earth, but the innermost onion level of the Earth is called the magma. And they taught us that the magma is obviously fiery, liquid rock. In other words, it's a source of all volcanoes. Magma goes up, it shoots up, and a continent is formed, right? So this magma, or this core of the earth, is Gehinnom. Why is it Gehinnom? I can't explain it in depth now, but one day I will explain it to you, and you will come to know that before the earth was created or developed into what it is today by God, for billions and trillions of years, it used to be a prison for rebellious and fallen angels, otherwise known as demons. Okay? So when it says that the wicked go to Gehinnom or the evil people go to hell, please understand it is not literal. Not literal at all. The Bible speaks in figurative form as well. So you don't die. Our friend Mr. Mouse did not go to the belly of the earth. What it means is when Mr. Mouse is his neshama is ascending to God over here, and here's Mr. Mouse, his soul, for example, let's say this is his soul, is ascending to God. If Mr. Mouse was a murderer, let's say Mr. Mouse was a murderer, and he died without having confessed his sins and said sorry to God, he never received God's forgiveness. When he dies, before he gets to God, when he is aware that he's dead and he presents himself before God, his soul is burning with guilt. He's burning with regret. He understands that he has fallen short of what he was sent to do on earth. So the feeling of being in God, being in front of God without being repented, without having received forgiveness, it is a burning sensation. And this burning is a literal sensation of fire. It purifies Mr. Mouse. Because Mr. Mouse cannot form part of God again as a soul if he's sinful. So God has to purge Mr. Mouse with judgments that feel like a burning fire that purifies Mr. Mouse. And then eventually God takes the soul of Mr. Mouse back because the soul is a part of God in any case. Mr. Mouse was not a soul apart from God. Even though he was evil, he's attached to God because he was a soul. So hell is not a literal, it's not like the magma of the earth is just bubbling with fire and there's people. There are no people here, only demons that have fallen. And these demons will be destroyed by God at the end of times when God returns to this earth the second time. When I say the second return of God, I'm not talking about Jesus. I'm talking about God because God is the one that's coming back to this earth the second time. He left the earth in the beginning, in the early days of the second temple, which was built or rebuilt by King Cyrus when the Jews came back from captivity in Babylon. But because the Jews developed a very bad habit of hating each other, God said, I cannot live among you, my people, because you hate each other. It's called Sinat Chinam. So God left the temple, he went to heaven. By the time that the Jewish rabbi called Yeshua, whom you've been told is Jesus, which is not, by the time he was born, God was no longer living in the temple. What do I mean? What I mean is the Shekhinah, which is God's glory, which is the female attribute of God, was not living in the temple anymore. It had gone back to heaven. So at the end of days, when God returns, God comes back in his complete male and female attributes as our God. The Shekhinah will return, God will return. That's the only second coming that the Bible talks about. All right? If you have a Christian Bible, you're probably going to show me that there's going to be a second coming of Jesus or JC. And I would say no, there isn't, because the Christian Bible was produced by the church over a period of 800 years, published in the ninth century. Before that, what Bible did people read? What Bible did the Jewish rabbi Yeshua, who's called Jesus in the church, what Bible did he read? He read the Hebrew Bible. That's the original Bible of God. And in that Bible, there's no second coming of any Messiah. It's only God who's coming back the second time. But we'll get into those topics at a different time in depth. Maybe I might touch on them as answers to other people's questions. So there it is. So hell is not a physical place, it's an expression, but it's also the experience of an unrepented soul that that has to face God for all the sins that it committed on earth, which it did not confess and receive forgiveness for. What about heaven? So heaven is the sky. In the Christian church, you were taught that heaven is up there in the sky. We're going to heaven in the sky. We're going to go up, up, up. It's not true. Okay. It's not true because when God decided to develop the earth was billions and trillions of years old. This is actually biblical. I will explain it to you someday in another teaching. So when the scientists say the world is billions and trillions of years old, they are onto something. They're actually correct. Even the Big Bang Theory is not a theory. It has a basis in the Hebrew language in Genesis chapter 1, verses 2. Tohu vavohu, which is a violent convulsion of the sky to produce new heavenly bodies. So here we are. What are we talking about now? Okay, so God created the earth, and he gave the earth 6,000 years plus 1,000. So the today's date is 5785, which means there are 219 years left before. Actually, let me make sure. Is it 215? I think it's 215, actually. 215 years, 85, 215 years before the end of the world. So the end of the world is not in Hollywood in some movie. It's quoted in the Bible in Genesis chapter 1, verses 1. You can go see my lecture 1 on the continuous Genesis, I think. You can go see my lecture 1 on this channel to understand what I mean. So there are 215 years before the second coming of, or the second return of God and the first coming of the Messiah. So the first coming of the Messiah, the second coming of God is in 215 years. And then 6,000 plus 1,000 gives us 7,000 years. In total, the time given to human beings is 7,000 years. What will happen after 1,215 15 years, when the 7,000 years expires? We are going to have eternity, which means forever. Eternity is not measured by time. Time was given for the human beings. So when God returns for the second time, he comes to teach people who are not born Jewish, but have been redeemed and saved and live in the kingdom of Judah, which is the world to come, where God is king. This 1,000 years, people who were born Hindu, Christian, whatever religion, but loved God, they will be taught the Bible, the Torah, for 1,000 years, so that the tendency of rebellion and sin and imperfections is removed from the human DNA. That's why God gave us 6,000 to live on this earth and 1,000 for renewal and restoration in what's called the Jubilee, or what's called it's called the Jubilee, and also it's called the Messianic age. So the church taught us about heaven because the church wanted you to fix your attention in this world, in these governments of the world, and be okay with the church, and it benefits from you financially. It controls you. It gives you political systems. It gives you everything you need. You become subservient to it in many ways and many forms. And it gives you and it promises you what's called a heaven, a paradise. God doesn't promise us a paradise. God, in after this 6,000 years, God will restore the Garden of Eden, which was taken away because of Adam and Eve's sin. So God will restore Eden and the city of Jerusalem, because God will rule as king from Jerusalem. Jerusalem belongs to God. The land of Israel belongs to the Jewish people, doesn't belong to the Muslims or anybody else, even the Christians for that matter. But because this political world we live in is ruled by the church, it means that Jerusalem today is ruled by the church, which is why you have the Templar Society established after the Crusades in Jerusalem to rule Jerusalem. So God will restore the Garden of Eden and give us a renewed city of Jerusalem where he will be king, where we will worship God throughout throughout the time that comes after eternity, at the expiration of 1,215 years from now. So there you have it. What happens to the souls then? What happened to Mr. Mouse? So here's God. Here's Mr. Mouse. Mr. Mouse's body is in a grave in South London. When God returns in 215 years' time, when the 6,000 years expires and we cross over to the plus 1,000 or the 7,000th year, a shofar, a trumpet, a ram's horn is going to sound, and the grave of Mr. Mouse is going to break open. Mr. Mouse, his soul will be restored to a new body, and he will rise and resurrect as a new and perfect being, if Mr. Mouse died having confessed his sins, changed his character, and became a person and lived a life that God approves of. But if Mr. Mouse died and he experienced hell by being in the presence of God, and his name is not in the book of life, but in the book of remembrance, Mr. Mouse will not find resurrection. It's that simple. So there you have it. You probably have a million questions. Please feel free to ask those questions. Here's my email. This is my email for now. Oops. You can email me here if you want some answers to your questions, or if you want to study formally. If you enjoyed this lecture, if it was beneficial to you, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, blah, blah, blah. If you are grateful for what you received and you want to donate something towards this effort, you can just email me here. I will give you the pertinent details. Have a wonderful evening, and God bless your Bible study and guide you in your process of revelation and learning and discovering new things. See you later.